Welcome to another monthly OUSA Forum. I'm John Torrance, the VP Competition. I'm the host tonight, and we have presenting members of the Youth Mapping Program Committee to tell us everything we want to know about the Youth Mapping Program. We're going to let them present and then do a Q&A afterwards. We should have plenty of time for questions. During the Q&A, please keep your microphone muted until it's time for you to speak, and use the raise your hand function, the hand symbol, to indicate that you want to comment or ask a question. And we'll try to call on people in the order they do that. A reminder, we're recording this for people to watch on YouTube later. So if you're uncomfortable with being recorded, you can turn off your video, you can refrain from speaking, or you can leave entirely, whatever you're comfortable with. You can see at the bottom of the slide there, there's some settings you can change. I believe these apply if you're watching on a laptop. They might be a little bit different on a phone, in order to maximize the presentation on your screen as much as possible. That's the best view. With that, Barb, take it away.
Thanks a lot, John. My name is Barb Bryant, and I am the chair of the Youth Mapping Program Committee. I will be starting off tonight by giving you an overview of our program. And then John Campbell, another member of our committee, will talk in more detail about how we develop mappers and how to become a mapper. And then we'll have questions and discussion that will include Andrea Schneider and Bill Cusworth, who are other members of our committee. So Orienteering USA's mission includes increasing participation in orienteering and teaching map reading and navigation skills. And it was those first two parts of OUSA's mission that we were aiming to tackle with this new program in 2019. So the Youth Mapping Program goals are to introduce orienteering to as many youth as possible in this country. And to do that, we want to recruit new educators at new schools and other youth serving organizations to teach orienteering. And then we want to match them with orienteering cartographers to give them the maps that they can use to do that teaching. We provide grants, we provide suggestions about teaching resources, and we also want to develop mappers so that we have more mappers in our country to make more maps. So to date, we have completed 62 of the maps in this program. We have another 13 active projects. 34 different mappers have applied and been onboarded. There are 21 active currently. So we do have available capacity to make more maps. We have grant funding available. And over those last 4 years, we have received applications from people in 27 different states. Those people include folks at schools, parks and rec departments, JROTC units, scout troops, summer camps, YMCAs, outdoor and environmental education centers, as well as outdoor therapy or camps for people with disabilities. So it's been quite a wide variety of folks. There is a webpage on the Orienteering USA website with information about our program. It includes the purpose of our program, the process for applying for being a mapper, how much it costs to get a map made, links to applications for getting a map made or for becoming a mapper. Oh, that arrow is supposed to be pointing from the map of maps to this little picture, and then it lists the committee. So on the right, we're showing a screenshot from that webpage, which is a map that gets updated periodically, showing all the places that we have made maps through this program. And in most cases, you can actually click on them and get the actual map. A year ago, we did a survey, and a minority of the people that had gotten maps made responded. I didn't chase people down, but I thought it was pretty cool that from just 16 respondents, they reported having put on about 160 events and classes with those maps that they had made, serving 2,600 children and 310 adult participants, and that represented nearly 100 educators being involved on those 16 maps. The ways that they reported using the maps is in classes in school, K through 12 PE and other classes, college classes for outdoor ed and PE majors, summer camps, World Orienteering Day, Parks and Rec classes. So those are all sort of teaching opportunities. And then there's also reports of permanent courses, local clubs doing bring your own map sprint courses, and orienteering teams practicing on the maps. And then they also reported some environmental education related uses, including mapping trees with an arborist and then doing a tree identification project and planting areas with invasive plants that was helpful to map work sites for community cleanup efforts with this orienteering map that had been made. So then I realized that not only had we hit these first two bullets, but also the third one. So I also want to say that we're not the only country to be working on this effort. There are, for example, in these 4 countries, there are big efforts to get school maps made. In Canada, as I reported a couple months ago at the OUSA Forum about school orienteering, Ottawa's got 72 school maps, Edmonton is over 300. In Norway, they have a wonderful database that teachers throughout the country can use with maps and courses on those maps. And that represents 20% of all schools in Norway. I would love to get to that fraction in the United States, which would be about 26,000 schools with maps. Let's do it. They also have an online course drawing tool, very simple but very useful to just stay on the website and be able to draw courses. Czech Republic and Switzerland also have projects to make maps. So how things work in the youth mapping project is we have a committee and we meet monthly and look at new applications that we've gotten and make decisions about grants and mappers and how much the map will cost. The coordinator communicates with the consultant in the youth organization. The consultant is a resource for the map maker. That's somebody who's very experienced and who guides the mapper, answers the mapper's questions, and checks in periodically, and then does a final review and okays the map. Then there's the map maker, the cartographer, who communicates with what we call the eyes on the ground. We'll tell you more about that, but that's sort of like a field checker. It's someone from the youth organization. Our process is that the youth organization applies for getting a map made. And then the committee, which is represented in orange here, gathers more information from the organization. Then we decide whether or not to provide a grant. We assign the mapper, set up this starting map file. And then we get both the mapper and the youth organization to sign contracts, and the youth organization pays an initial fee. So they've got some skin in the game. And then we can start mapping. The mapper works on the map. The youth organization provides photos and videos and answers the mapper's questions. Because the mapper is working remotely. Then the consultant, the YMP consultant will review the map and approve it. Once it's approved, we'll pay the mapper and the consultant and the youth organization will pay any remaining amount, and then we'll release the map. So that's our process. The orienteering mappers, everybody is welcome to apply to be a mapper. You do need to have some basic competence in Open Orienteering Mapper or OCAD, and John will tell you more about that and how to develop that. You need to understand the sprint mapping standard. There is an application and onboarding that we do. We provide support. There's a mailing list so you can communicate with other mappers. We have consultants who mentor you, and we have written guidelines about producing the map. We want to give fair compensation to mappers. A few mappers also volunteer their time, which is great. And then I want to emphasize that the map makers have this key relationship with that youth organization and with educators there, and have the ability to influence them and to encourage them and to inspire them to use the map for teaching kids. We're super excited that about half of our mappers are current and recent Orienteering USA juniors, so either on the junior team or the coming up through the junior development program. And John Campbell will say a lot more about mappers, but I want to say a few things first about cost. So we have a formula for deciding how much the map is going to cost, and that depends on the complexity of the map, and it includes an Orienteering USA fee and a map consultant fee. And we do provide grants to organizations up to about half for up to about half a square kilometer. The maximum size map that we do is 1 square kilometer. These are small teaching maps. And when we do give grants, we look at how the youth organization is planning to use the map and whether they're going to be teaching kids with it. As an example, if we had a 0.4 square kilometer easy map that costs $700, most of that will go to the mapper, and then there'll be a little bit taken out for the consultant and Orienteering USA. And if we make a grant that comes out of our budget from OUSA. Yeah. So typically we have a slight loss, and Orienteering USA that's part of OUSA's budget to achieve its mission. So since 2019, according to our records, the total price of all the maps that we've made is $41,829. We've had donations from mappers and consultants of services. And we've made almost $25,000 in grants, and we've paid mappers and consultants nearly $40,000. So over those 4 or so years, basically OUSA has been spending about $4,000 a year on this program. This $41,829, just want to break that down for you a little bit in 2 dimensions. So there's the dimension of where it's going to the map maker or the consultant or to OUSA. And then there's also a dimension of, have we completed the map yet and received the income, or is it a conference map, which I'll tell you more about in a minute. And then there's a bunch that's in process. Just a note about why I think the youth mapping program is valuable for OUSA clubs, in addition to just like achieving those missions that I was describing earlier. So we're developing mappers, and hopefully those mappers can go back to their clubs and be a resource to make more maps for the club. We also want to spread out the teaching burden to other educators so that the local club isn't the only one responsible in the area for teaching orienteering. Increase participation in the sport, especially for small clubs that don't have a lot of resources to respond to school inquiries. We would like to be able to handle those for you. And finally, there will be a bunch of small maps in your area if schools request those maps, and those can be used by you if you have access to that area for little sprints or trainings or introductions for folks to orienteering. So I mentioned earlier that we have started going to conferences, educator conferences, and we've really picked up the pace on this because it's been, we feel like it's got pretty good return and people are interested. So we have gone to physical education conferences, math teacher conferences, environmental education, experiential education, and outdoor education. And we've been in a number of different states, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, because I live here, West Virginia, Iowa, California, Colorado, maybe other places. And the key messages that we want to get across at these conferences to these educators are not only that you can get a map made through Orienteering USA's Youth Mapping Project, but also some ideas about how to teach orienteering. I find that I need to start off that most of the people come into these workshops thinking that orienteering is throwing a bearing and following a bearing for a certain distance. That's orienteering. That doesn't involve a map. So I need to educate them about how orienteering is map navigation, and then how to teach kids in a fun progression of activities, which we try out together. And I usually am able to get them out on a map at the place where the conference is being held, and they have a great time and they bond with other people there. So it's super fun. The other messages we want to get across to the educators is that it's easy to get started. You don't need a lot of equipment, and we have resources that you can use. Of course, we want to communicate that orienteering is incredibly good for kids. and tell them about their local club in case they would like to do some orienteering and improve themselves. So here, these are just pictures from recent conferences that we've presented at. And we are now interested in having other people in the orienteering community deliver these conference workshops near you so that we're not traveling so much. And we are happy to help you apply to give that workshop and to provide the content and to talk you through it and give you any support that you need. Here's an example of a map that we made for a conference at the YMCA of the Rockies, and I'll be going back there for another conference, hopefully later this year. And we have gotten the local orienteering club, Rocky Mountain Orienteering Club, involved, and we're hoping that this will eventually turn into a great sprint map and expand to have a new forest map of that area. And now I'd like to turn it over to John Campbell.
Thanks, Barb. Reminder that this is remote mapping. No one steps foot out there on the property, not the mapper, not an experienced field checker, frankly, not an experienced orienteer in most cases. So how on earth are we doing it? And isn't this just an auto-generated cart to pull out and style map? We don't think so, because there's feedback, right? It may be feedback from a novice, someone that requested the map, but it is still somebody that we call them eyes on the ground that can provide feedback from the location. And I will admit, I got involved in YMP because I thought this was a terribly sketchy idea, and it's something that could really go wrong. And I frankly wanted to be involved rather than sit on the sidelines and complain about it. Next slide. These are, as Barb said, intended only as small teaching maps to teach orienteering to beginners. You'll see most of them are school campuses or similar properties. And we are sort of filling that need when people go, if only I had a map, I could do something. And I know from involvement in clubs that those requests come in often to produce a small map or to run a small event. And, clubs are stretched with volunteers, they're stretched with mappers, they're stretched with money and time to do that. So we think this is filling a niche that has historically not been well filled by a lot of clubs. Next slide. Wearing my skeptic hat, it has to be the right area for remote mapping, right? Here on the left is a school, right? And you can see that probably 90% of the relevant detail is visible in this imagery, right? Yeah, there's some shadows north of the building. There's probably some wooded pieces of the property that are going to be tough, but that's a whole different story than this camp on the right-hand side also serves a bunch of youth. But, you can see some buildings in the trees, but there's going to be a whole lot going on there that we're not going to be able to extract. And that's probably a project that we're going to turn down or offer them other ways to think about providing navigation training. Next. We provide a lot of support to mappers, as Barb said, mentoring, feedback, doing some instruction with new mappers. We sort of meet them where they are. And we provide them a bunch of examples to communicate with the eyes on the ground, which I'll go into in the next couple of slides. But after the first couple rounds of YMP maps, we made some changes because we were finding that our mappers were struggling with certain aspects of making a map. One, these are unique scales, right? These are 1 to 1,000, 1 to 2,000, and the iOS specifications at those scales are not proportional mapping, right? So you do not just zoom in, you start to mess with symbol sizes, and that can be a mess in the software. So we set that up now and give mappers the right scaled symbol set to start with. And anyone who's done any mapping knows that you can really get frustrated with processing LiDAR and what to pull out of that. And you can also get frustrated with, you get some great imagery from the county or from the state and it's not lining up with your project, right? And so we, with a lot of experience, particularly Andrea Schneider does a lot of that, does all that setup for our projects and gets people going on the actual drafting and cartography. And then, as Barb mentioned, we keep the youth org involved, making sure they have skin in the game, both from a monetary perspective and from an effort perspective. And moving forward, we're starting to experiment with getting some of the feedback from the youth organization early on. You know, we sort of call it the honeymoon period, when they are excited. Hey, their application has been approved. They've gotten this grant. They want to get things going, and the project can fall into the black hole of, we got to produce some contracts. We got to get it out to the mapper. They got to have time. So we're going to start asking youth organizations to provide some ground level photography up front, because you can do a lot with, if you've messed with Google Street View, where that views properties. So it's sort of replicating that. Next slide. This is a great example. One of our mappers, Julia Dobson, worked on this project, and this is a great example of, she drafted all this stuff up and then sent the map on the left with, you'll see there's little purple annotations in there, and they correspond to these questions on the right. Right? Hey, the trees where the X's are they still there? I've got imagery that shows different things, right? Or are there gaps in the fence? Are there gaps in the trees? Should this be out of bounds? You know, you can tell it's a garden, but you have no idea whether there's stuff planted there that they want kids to stay out of, or, oh yeah, they're happy to have kids run into the corner of the building, right? So great example of mapper facilitating the conversation with the youth organization. And next slide. And we get the opposite. We get some that the mapper sends for questions, and the youth org goes crazy on like sending stuff back, taking pictures of the relevant stuff, and then also commenting on other sections of the map. And this particular slide is just one we pulled from I think they sent about a 50 slide packet back of feedback on the map. Doesn't always happen, but it is awesome to see. And this is a youth organization that definitely got the gold star from the YMP committee. Next slide. And we get mappers of all ability levels. And as I said, we try to meet them where they are. And how do you get better as an orienteering mapper? One is to take courses. And I'm going to put a plug in here for Jeff Teutsch in navigation sports. I just sat through a winter offering of his courses. I've been mapping full time since 2018, and I learned things at his courses. It was fantastic. And I would recommend to clubs, if you have someone interested in mapping, pick up the tab to send them to those courses. They will pay you back in spades. And the other way to become a better mapper is to jump into mapping, right? And the best way is a starter project, right? Something where it is small, it is contained. You are not going to jump into a mapping with a 6 square kilometer forest project where you're going to use it for an NRE, right? Because that's just a recipe for frustration. So that's something we are ultimately trying to do. And I'll be honest, after being involved in a program for a couple of years, I'm not sure whether the greatest benefit is these maps we're producing or the fact that we are making better mappers. And next slide. So one final reminder from the sort of in-house skeptic. These are small beginner maps, right? Intended for teaching orienteering. These are not NRE quality maps. Anyone listening to this call, any OUSA member, I would expect you to walk onto these and be able to start finding errors, start finding omissions quickly, right? But that's not the intent for these maps. Next. And Barb, are you popping back
You're muted,
on?
Barb.
Great. Sorry, guys. Thanks, John. Yeah, I just want to remind everyone of our goals, which are to introduce orienteering to every kid in America by recruiting new educators, matching them with remote cartographers, providing grants, teaching resources, and developing mappers. And I want to thank you. And the YMP committee will be sticking around to answer questions. That's Bill Cussworth, Andrea Schneider, John Campbell, and myself. And we're ready to talk.
Okay, Andrea Schneider.
One
has
comment I
something
would
to
like
say.
one comment I would like to make. We have one of the young mappers on, so if you want to have a question for what's the experience as a young mapper, Lily is on the call too.
Okay, Jeff, go ahead.
Sure, I'll start things off. You had mentioned, John, about the odd scales and adapting the IOF specification and symbol sizes. Are you using a particular school specification? Like the British Orienteering Federation has one. I believe certain other federations have their own school specifications. Or what are you using to do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're using the IOF school specifications, which they came out with, I think, in 2019 for a World Orienteering Day. It adds a couple of strange symbols: fire hydrant, table, lamppost, utility pole, that sort of thing. It is intended for scales between 1 to 1,000 and 1 to 2,500. And then there's a gap before a normal sprint map ISPROM scale is, of course, 4,000, and it allows beginner zoom ins to 1 to 3,000. So there is an odd gap there between those two specifications. And what makes it unique is that it calls for symbol sizes at 125% of what a normal sprint symbol is. But it is very specific to the scale, right? So those are fixed sizes then, and they don't zoom in and out, which is, we sort of have to decide on a scale up front, or we cause drafting problems.
Your answer makes me realize when you were saying earlier about the level of pain, I guess, involved, is that it's not just here's a symbol set, but okay, for that scale, we got to adjust it a certain way, right?
Right. And the other thing for those that have messed with scaling maps is there are things that you want to get larger or get smaller, but there are other things like an 8-point font for a legend. You want that to be 8-point font at 1 to 10,000, 1 to 5,000, 1 to 2,000, right? You want your legend font to all be the same. So it can get fairly complicated.
I believe the next in the queue is Aleta. Please go ahead.
Yeah, she accidentally raised her hand.
I can't find the chat.
Okay, there was someone after that, but I need to find where to open up the queue. If they want to just jump in. Maybe they've stepped away. I'm personally a bit curious. Do you, John, or anyone else know how many of the people who have started mapping with the YMP have taken on larger mapping projects that would be involving field checking themselves?
I don't know how many have taken on projects after YMP. We have some that are sort of doing YMP projects on the side of working other projects. So I don't really know the direct benefit, at least having it documented.
Okay. Now I've managed to open my queue. So Ian Dunlap, you are at the top of it. Go ahead.
Okay, this might be more of a question for Lily, but like, how much time do you think like a standard map would take to make, or does it vary too wildly to guess?
I can give you my best estimate on it. I've only worked on one project so far, but I would say I've probably put 12 to 15 hours into it or more maybe. But I haven't done any of the post field checking work yet. So I sent the map out to the eyes on the ground person, and then she still has yet to get back to me for me to put in all the final details. But yeah, I would expect upward of like 20 hours, not 20, maybe 18. Yeah.
For how large an area, Lily?
It was probably around a kilometer, perhaps, or the basic size. But the hardest part about it is that it is a little bit more forested, so that's what's taken me a bit longer.
Lily, how did you decide to become a mapper for YMP?
I'm really interested in making maps because, like you guys have mentioned, that's like the main way to build an orienteering community is you need more maps to run on. So Andrea reached out to me and she told me that this was available if I was interested, and I really am. So that's why I started on it.
Has it changed the way you like look at maps or orienteer or anything?
Yeah, I would say definitely. It's really cool to be like on the other side of it and be like, oh, this is why this person mapped it this way, and this is why they did this. You know, I have more of an appreciation for the maps I run on now, for sure, I would say.
Ian, go ahead again.
Thank you. So, I've only used Open Orienteering Mapper. I'm wondering, like, how people would compare Open Orienteering Mapper with the other one, like, I forget what it's called, the other mapping software.
I'm not sure who best should field that question.
I'll take a swing at that. The mapping software, the two main ones, right, are OCAD and Open Orienteering Mapper. And I think they are very much like Android and iPhone. You have diehards in either direction, but frankly, they all do about the same thing. I have used both for projects from start to finish, and each software has some things that it does better than the other. And, you go with what you're most comfortable in. And there are very good mappers, Jeff Teutsch in this call, that jumps back and forth between them in any project. And so he knows sort of the quirks of what that causes, because they are not 100% compatible. They do make small changes as you jump back and forth, but they're small changes.
And I just wanted to point out that Open Orienteering Mapper can open OCAD maps, right? So you don't have to like do some sort of conversion.
It also saves them as well
Yeah, saves them too, right? So you can basically use either program and still be working on the same file.
Yeah, I use Open Orienteering Mapper for the mapping, and then I use Condis for setting courses, and Condis only takes the OCAD files, so it's constantly switching back and forth.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
And one more thing is, as an OOM mapper with OCAD viewer, you can see what an OCAD person would see on your OOM map saved in OCAD, if that makes any sense.
Yep.
Okay. Anna has had her hand raised for a minute now. So go ahead, please.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Question for Jonathan Campbell. We are in Quebec and we recently got some money to produce mini school maps and starting from scratch, and everybody's doing their way. Now, my question to you, could we get the your legend set and the symbol set for different scales? We would definitely have to modify, we have to make everything in French, but I like the layout and I like the uniformity of your maps. So we should get something, and we have some money we can pay for it actually.
Yeah,
Yep.
I think we'd be happy to share that.
Yeah, we talked about it, and we are in favor of sharing it, and we just would need to remove some of the OUSA specific stuff. But yes, that would be, it'd be great to have other people using it.
Fantastic. I'm just gonna put my email into the chat because I don't think I have a possibility to like direct the question to one person. So I'm just gonna put my email there. Thank you so much.
While waiting for anyone else to raise their hand, I'm curious, does the YMP have OCAD licenses for people to use if they want to use OCAD, or do all the mappers buy themselves well, I guess you actually rent OCAD these days since it's a subscription service.
We do not have subscriptions. So typically, I would say 90% of our mappers are then working in Open Orienteering Mapper, which, once the LiDAR processing is done, which is one of the huge advantages of OCAD, and the map is all set up. It's frankly, the drafting is 6 of one, half dozen of another. And we have stopped reconverting them. We will happily file an OMAP version or convert it to OCAD. We're asking youth orgs to use Purple Pen to design their courses, and of course, Purple Pen will open both OCAD and OMAP files natively. So
another thing to that question is, everyone on the committee has OCAD. So sometimes in the future, it may be useful to make sure that there is a license for the committee, because the committee processes the base maps and everything that a mapper needs to then open up. But we don't really need, a mapper that's joining YMP doesn't need OCAD.
Yeah, by the way, so it sounds like for the base map creation, you have a preference for OCAD. Is that an endorsement of it for LiDAR processing versus OOM, or is it just a result of the experience of the person who's doing that base map creation?
Oh, I use both. I can work in both. OOM just does not have any LiDAR processing as of now, does not have any LiDAR processing. So all the hill shade and vegetation height and vegetation whatever and contour creation, that does not exist in OCAD, in OOM. OOM person would have to go and create it in Cartapulautin or find other ways to do it, where OCAD does it. So just up to where you hand a base map to a mapper, definitely OCAD.
I may have misunderstood what I was handed on a past project once. I thought I was given contours that had been generated in OOM. Or I may be misremembering. You know, I know I found Cartopulatin contours less satisfactory than OCAD contours, given good quality LiDAR. But both of them will wash out some amount of relevant detail. Gord, go ahead. I'm not muted, am I? Gord, you can ask your question.
Okay, I double clicked and it went on and then off. OCAD is definitely the ways to go to get the LiDAR created. And for projects across America, I've been doing that using OCAD in NOAA and USGS LiDAR very quickly, turning out the map. And as Bill said, Open Orienteering Mapper will import that file into Open Orienteering Mapper. It can be shipped out to somebody who's working in that area. So if Youth Mapping Project is ever having a problem with that, that's the way to go. Find somebody who's comfortable doing the start of it in OCAD and then ship it on over in Open Orienteering Mapper. But the question I had, if I could throw it in right now, is there was a mention of the resources to use to teach orienteering once the group has the map. Is that collected anywhere? And can we distribute that more widely? I have probably 20 schools in Florida that have received maps, not as part of the Youth Mapping Project, but just they've received maps to encourage them to come to orienteering events, and it works well. But I'm kind of at a loss as to have an organized way of telling the instructors how to use the maps of their schools and the maps of their nearby parks to get the best training for their students. So is it available anywhere in a package?
Yeah, Andrea, could you take this one?
Well, it depends really on, there's two ways. For younger kids, it's navigation games that has the necessary tools for younger educators. You're talking more, I guess, older students, where you would want the educator, or then also have like, you come up with your seniors have had it 3 years, so you can have your seniors present that. We have collection. If you go to the OUSA YMP page, there is one, I forget what it's called. There's a link in there that has a collection of examples on of games and all kind of things that can be used for teaching.
I put the link into the chat.
And it really depends, because some want it more. So high schools can actually even use the mapping process. A teacher, rather than being the eyes on the ground, can say, okay, here are the eyes on the ground tasks, and then pass it on to the cadets, and then could use it even afterwards. After the map is made, they can still reuse that, and that is quite more on a map than what you would do as younger kids, if that makes sense.
Oh, that makes absolute sense. The best way to become an orienteer is to become a mapper. And become a competent orienteer is to become a mapper. You get to figure out what the mapper in the competitions is doing. So I totally agree with you there. And in my teaching days, I used to give out maps with a lot of detail left off and have the students fill it in. And they come back and produce a final map. And they're good at it. So everybody should be doing that.
There was one map that I happened to do. I picked up and I did it Warinanko Park, and the JROTC instructor actually started out with mapping their small little school and practicing field checking or eyes on the ground at that little school, and then had the cadets go out to Warinanko Park. And they used MapRun to actually create mini courses. So they learned that part and used MapRun to do their checking the various places they needed to check out. So there's a lot of information. It's not like Bark has for the for the teachers of younger students, where it's like where you have to hand them a card and it's like, this is your material to use and this is how much time it will take. So the resource we have on the website is more like a collection of all kind, and everyone can go in there and take whatever is suitable for their age group.
Okay, thanks for the link there, Barb. I hope I know how to get. One other thing, I was surprised to hear that projects are turned down. What happens to them once they're turned down? Do they just go away? Or do they come back and say, can we try something else? Or
no. So if someone submits something that is way too complicated, or what way too complicated is like it's really closer to 1 square kilometer, has primarily woods and all that kind of stuff, or is over, I would usually answer them and say, this is not within our scope. Explain why, and then I give them different options. We have now a project where someone came, because a lot of times you find that some of those that request a map have no concept of scale and size. They just say, oh, I want this map. And then when they later on is like, oh, do I really want this big map to teach on, or do I want a smaller map? Or yes, I want a bigger map. But then we say, like, here is a resource of mappers on the OUSA page. We can put you in touch with the club to see if you have terrain that they can use. You can partner with them and say, hey, we have the terrain. Can we have this map work with you as a club? But we don't go beyond, ledger size, 1 to 4,000 ledger size paper is really the biggest ever. Borderline. That's already big.
That's a fair size.
Right. But I mean, it is still under a square kilometer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we definitely do not go above that. It's not the purpose. It's not a teaching map anymore when it's that big.
Okay. I don't know how I did, but I was helping a guy in Louisiana with a map just last week, 2 weeks ago. And he said, here, he wants to map this park. And the park is totally forest covered. But by processing the LiDAR a little more complicated, was able to find out where the cabins in that state park are and get them mapped on, and where the washroom facilities and other buildings and the roads for the campsites are. So I'm surprised that the forest with LiDAR, with the forest is that much of an impediment. Anyway, maybe that's not an answerable question. But,
I can,
okay.
If folks are interested, I can answer that a little bit about the LiDAR. I think, Gord, there's 2 pieces to it. One is to get some of that to a reasonable level of detail. It's not your straightforward LiDAR processing. There's some extra tricks involved. You can do a lot of that. The other thing is, as a new mapper, figuring out how to interpret that LiDAR to be able to draw that is a whole different ballgame than drawing what you see on some satellite photos, right? And so, folks, yourself, you've got a lot of experience with LiDAR. John, myself, Andrea, others can go through the LiDAR and do that. But I think if you're talking about somebody who's on their first or maybe 5th project, it's an entirely different thing to be able to interpret the LiDAR and figure out what it's actually showing, right?
Well, it was just you do it. It was just the hill shading sheet and it came up with all these black shades and squares. But okay, that's got to be a building. It helped that the area was very flat. It's Louisiana after all. Okay, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
And it does seem like there ought to be some potential that places like the scout camp that you showed as an example of this is not suitable for remote mapping, that they might be able to have someone, maybe not a beginner, but have someone with some experience run it through Carter pull out and produce something that they could actually make use of. I don't know whether.
Yeah, we have had some projects that we have off-ramped to recommended mappers that have picked the project up outside of YMP. And we're typically just using our knowledge of who's in the area, right, to do that.
One more
Yeah,
thing,
I mean, that.
John, one more thing is a lot of times, like the map that is created through the YMP, okay, and then the process is done. But then if they want to expand in that area, they can work with that mapper off grid where no OUSA funding or anything is involved anymore, and they can take that project further. So we've had at least one, if not two projects where the communication afterwards to expand a map has gone on, but then that's not OUSA copyright anymore. The other maps, the smaller ones, are OUSA copyrighted.
Yeah. By the way, Barb, you mentioned back in your section that for the conferences that you're hoping you could recruit people to present at those rather than people from the committee having to travel to everything. Are there particular conferences that you aspire to get someone to go to?
Yeah, so I've been most excited about the physical education conferences. Just there's like a lot of people, and they can get started right away, and they can reach a lot of kids because they teach a lot of kids. So and every state has an annual PE teachers conference. The outdoor ed conferences and the environmental ed conferences are also pretty interesting, but I love the idea of getting orienteering into schools just to reach so many kids.
Okay. I guess which states do you already have covered as far as their annual PE teachers conference?
Yeah, I mean,
I guess
basically,
if
if anyone was
others, you would be interested in having someone volunteer to.
Yeah, basically, we'll take anybody and going to any state, even one that we have covered. And yeah, we had Deb Humiston in New Hampshire helping us out recently. Yeah, so if anyone's interested, we'll just find conferences that are near you and go from there.
Are these typically single day things or longer duration?
Yeah, they are typically, or if they're multiple days, then you can just hop in for your workshop. I like to stay and meet people because by networking a little bit, maybe I encourage people even more. But I often just go for the day of my workshop if it is a multiple day conference. Usually it's one day.
I mean, you definitely have capacity to produce more maps than you currently have active, if I've understood the presentation correctly. So I certainly hope some OUSA members will be inspired to. I mean, this would be typically a half-day commitment would be the minimum, maybe to.
Right. Yes. And I think it's fun. It's fun to go and meet new people and to learn a little bit about whatever the trends are in their area of education. We've learned a ton from attending these.
Yeah, well, I hope people feel inspired and it drums up some new demand for maps. Anyone else with some last questions or thoughts, we're getting close to our scheduled hour being up.
Barb, I want to say I thought it was a great presentation. I learned a lot, and there was a lot of detail that was really useful. So I want to thank you. This was really great. And John, yeah, and the discussion about the maps afterwards was really helpful too.
We have a question in the chat from Kathy Wincoop. Is there a minimum age? I assume she means for a mapper or aspiring mapper to apply for this program.
We have had, so given how things work, 16-year-olds we have decided that we can make contracts with, but we still like a parent to be kind of in the initial communication. We have had mappers under 15, but that's where we have a parent be in the books as the mapper, and then they can also guide the mapper. But there's the parent is signing the contracts and all that. Even we've had just one age out from there. Or I don't know when Maury started out as a 15-year-old, where his mom was the signee on the contracts. If that makes any sense.
Okay. Last chance for anything else? Going. Thank you, Barb, John, Andrea, everyone. See you at next month's forum, I hope. Do you want to, Joseph, do you want to say anything about what we're planning for that yet?
Next month's forum is tentative at this point, but it looks like, I can't remember his name, we're going to have an orienteering coach who's going to talk about how to improve your advanced orienteering skills.
Yeah, the email said it was Alexei Azarov.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Who would have come up through, I presume, the Russian coaching program back in his youth. Or maybe it was the Ukrainian or Belarusian. I'm not certain precisely where he originates from. But yes, that should be good. So I hope to see many of you there for that session. And have a good evening.
Yeah, and we'll have more details on that in another couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Thanks, John.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Good night.